Hello everybody, my name is Elijah. Welcome back to 85 Studios, and we are back to the paranormal stories from Linn in Kansas. And her stories of a haunted house that she's lived in for 20 years and other paranormal incidents and situations that she has experienced in her lifetime that we're sending to you. If you would like to share your story with us, be sure and hit us up on Facebook.com. Facebook.com/85studios1 is our page, and click send a message and tell us a summary of your story. We will contact you and let you know if a number to contact us if we are interested in hearing it. As well, you can also hit us up on Twitter at 85 Studios YouTube on Twitter, and just send us a direct message with a summary of your story, and we will get back with you and send you a phone number that you might be able to call to give us your ghost story. So with that, we're back to Linn in Kansas, telling her story. And Linn, when you finished up, when we ended the previous episode, which would have been 2, you were telling us that you were in a house where you saw a full body apparition, and you only stayed for, what was it, 6 months? 6 weeks?
Yeah, it was 6 weeks.
6 weeks. And when you left off, you were telling us that not only you saw the full-bodied apparition of a woman with sunken-in black eyes and just from the waist up, but you also had left the house because you had, in the middle of the night, in the freezing cold December, were hearing banging noises, and when you went to go check it out, there was a heavy oak basement door that was horizontal with the floor that was opening, picking itself up and slamming itself down. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Alright, I'm going to go ahead and let you continue. Go ahead and take it from here.
Okay, well, I think in the last series I had said that I had grabbed my coat and my stuff, and there had been a snowstorm. It was actually getting ready to snow some more. It was around 10 o'clock. And I had weighed my options of walking a couple of blocks versus staying at that house. Being very large in pregnancy, I decided that I was going to walk, and I did. I very carefully made it to my friend's house, and I did tell her what was happening. I did not leave a note for my husband at that time. I just left. I was very, very terrified. I mean, as I was walking and I was making my way, hoping not to fall on the ice, I realized that there was not one part of me, no matter how gorgeous that home was, that there was not one part of me that was wanting to stay in that house ever again. And when my husband got home around midnight, because he was working the 4 to midnight shift, he had called a few places looking, where's my wife? He called. I think my understanding was, from what he said, that my friend's house was the second place that he called. I guess the first place was the hospital, because of me being pregnant and everything. He didn't know something had happened. But he called my friend's house, and I did. I told him at that point in time that he could find another place for us to live. There was absolutely no way I think my words to him were actually, there's absolutely no way in hell I will ever set foot in that house again. I think that's where, yeah, pretty much my exact words to him. And he knew I wasn't fooling around. I wasn't kidding. He came over, got me, tried to convince me to go back to the house. And there's just, there was no way I was budging. So we sat there and we did talk about, you know, what our options were as far as moving goes and that sort of stuff. And my friend said that we could stay there with her for a little bit, and that's pretty much what we did. We stayed there, and he repacked the house up. Told the landlord. He actually, if I remember right, he said that he actually told the landlord what the issue was, and of course the landlord was not surprised. Remember, he did tell me that the previous renters had said the house was haunted.
Yeah.
So it didn't really surprise him. He did, he gave us our deposit back. The guy, I mean, like I said, the landlord was just a real sweetheart. We did find another house fairly quickly. And we moved in there, and everything was fine. I never had any other issues. We lived in that house for almost a year, and we moved to other houses, you know, throughout the next 12 years. Never had any other issues, never had any strange events, nothing. I wanted to talk to people who think that, you know, that I'm full of crap in regards to, pardon my language, in regards to what happened and what the rest of my life was like after moving into this house that we bought. I know that there's a lot of people that don't believe in paranormal. They don't believe in ghosts. They don't believe there's any such thing. They look at what I'm saying as a source of entertainment. That's fine if you really think that's entertainment. And I know that there's other people that are just, like I said, they're going to think that I'm full of crap. I'm not.
Well, once you rule out what is normal and what can be logically explained and what can be debunked as something that you're confused that, you know, you think is something that actually isn't, what you have left is the unexplainable, as the paranormal. If it can't be explained, I mean...
You know, and that's my whole thing with both houses. There is absolutely... I mean, if you can explain to me, if anybody can explain to me how cabinets that have these little locks on them can open on their own, push out only the two things that I used, that I was going to use to cook this and bake this cake with, mix and bake this cake with, and then shut and be locked within a matter of less than 10 minutes, you know, or you can explain to me how a heavy wooden oak door like that can open and shut on its own, because it's not wind.
Mm-hmm.
This door was flush with the floor, and you had to pick it up. You didn't push it, you had to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then it had a latch. on the side that hooked up so it didn't fall on your head.
Yeah, that's...
You know, and you know, how does that open up by itself? Now the apparition, I've always been somewhat of a gutsy kind of person, I suppose. After that happened, I did go to my friend's house, and when I did go back into that library. I turned on the lights. I looked everywhere. And there were some windows, but the pine trees that I had said were on the side of that yard, they pretty much blocked out any kind of light. And there was no side light, that whole yard was pitch black. So there wasn't like a reflection or something like that that could have made something that maybe resembled something. The next night that I was there, my husband was still working the 4 to midnight shift. Nothing happened. I even looked over there. I looked over there around that same time when it had happened the night before. Guys, there was nothing there. There was nothing there. And I never saw it again. I mean, I never saw that apparition like that again. And I don't have any explanations. I can tell you guys, and I've agreed with Elijah to tell you my story and tell you what I experienced. And I'm going to have to leave that up to you guys to decide whether or not to believe me or not, or whether, to think I'm full of crap. But I'm going to tell you I'm not. I've had a successful life, a successful career. I'm 55 years old. My career choice was such that I was put in positions where I had to be open and honest and upfront about things. I had to be very, very trustworthy. And that's just always been who I am. And I guess that's pretty much all I have to say about this whole situation as far as to those that don't believe. Now, some of you guys might be asking, why didn't I call in Paranormal, and why didn't I do this, and why did I do that? Well, I didn't know anything about those places. When this whole situation happened with the first house, I was so happy to be out of it that I just wanted to forget about it. I was expecting my very first child, and I needed to get busy on, I'm halfway through my pregnancy. I've got to redo the baby room and getting things ready for the baby, and I've got stuff to do. I'm not going to sit there and ponder over what happened in that house. I'm just going to be happy that I'm out of that. Yeah. And that I'm not having to deal with it.
The other reason why I think a lot of people, when they have these kind of experiences, they don't want to talk about it is because they, number one, don't know who they would talk to, especially back then, and it was probably probably 80s. And I mean,
well, when all of that happened, it was actually very, very early 80s. Like I said, there were no the only thing that was out there that I'd ever heard of that was any kind of ghost stuff was, like Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, see, the paranormal has become a lot more mainstream probably the last, I would say, even 10 to 15 years, even, I mean, that's maybe a little bold, but before that, even in the 90s, growing up as a kid, I don't even remember hearing too much about paranormal investigative groups or even these ghost shows that you see on TV. The stuff like that. You didn't really hear too much about it. I mean, I think Travel Channel started showing one ghost show or something like that. I think it was like Ghost Adventures or something like that. But I didn't hear a whole lot of it, and I mean, it really didn't even take off then.
And that's the other thing. I didn't really watch a lot of TV.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a book reader, and I would go and buy different kinds of books, several different books, and you were more likely to see me reading a book or doing some kind of arts and crafts kind of stuff, and at the very most listening to music.
Yeah.
But TV just really wasn't a part of my life growing up, and I never really, I never really got into watching TV or watching that stuff. I don't know, I had too much other stuff going on in my life to really watch much TV. I'm actually using the internet, and have for the last 4 or 5 years, to catch up on some of the cool stuff that I apparently missed out on, as far as movies and sitcoms and stuff like that.
The internet is great. I mean, there's one side of it that's really cool, but I mean, you got to think, anytime you release anything on the internet, there's okay, because so many people have come through and they've gone through and they've made all these fake videos of stuff that's paranormal, and they've done all this stuff for entertainment purposes and that kind of stuff, and to cheat people and grow an audience by false means and stuff like that. For every 100 of those people that are out there, there's maybe 1 or 2 people that are actually capable and willing to share their true story of what actually happened, and it's something that's absolutely intense, and then nobody believes them because there's so much fake stuff out there. And that right there is pretty much what I'm trying to prevent by actually getting people who have real stories of paranormal things that have happened to them, and interviewing them and talking to them about their encounters with these things, because they do exist. They are real, and I have actual video proof of that. In my adventures, when I go out and do paranormal investigations, everything that you see happened 100%. I don't add in special effects, I don't add in sounds, I don't do anything like that. No video, I don't even know how to edit, really.
That is part of the reason why I thought, I had actually thought about writing a book.
Yeah.
But I'm not a writer. I mean, I read books, but I'm not a writer. And I also thought, I'm really not out there to make any kind of profit. This is not going to bring me any profit. I'm not even using my real name. I'm not using my children's names. I'm not using my husband's name. I'm not using anything as far as locations go, because the people that own those homes now, they don't need to be disturbed. I don't want them disturbed. And I know that people might want to go out there and try to do whatever, EVPs or what have you. Well, those places are people's personal property, and they need to be respected. And that means, and Kansas has some serious laws about gun policies and gun laws.
Mm-hmm.
That you could get hurt.
That's true.
Because you're invading somebody's personal property.
However, there are actually public locations which actually are haunted. I've been to a couple of them on my channel myself. However, I do not ever recommend that you do what I did and go out there alone at night by yourself. And if you do, make sure that somebody knows where you are at all times, and that you have a time set that you should be back by. And if you're not back by that time, that somebody's going to come looking for you, because there are any number of possibilities, things that could happen to you while you're out there by yourself. Which is the reason why I tell you, don't go out there by yourself. Take somebody with you.
Well, and even if you don't get hurt, if you're on somebody else's property, I mean, you could get charges filed against you.
Yeah.
You could end up, it's
private property.
Not worth it to try to. And I'm sorry that I'm not giving my real name and I'm not giving these places. I really would love to do that, but I also have to protect myself and I have to protect my family. We have been through enough.
Mm-hmm.
We are away from those places. We've been away from those places a while now. And I am coming on your show and talking about it, but I really don't want to talk to anyone else. I don't want to. I'm doing this. Part of it is for therapy for me. The things that happen to me, I think over the long run, over the long term, they traumatize me. I don't sleep with the lights off in my house. Even though I've been away from that last house that I lived in for 20 years. I've been away from that for a very long time now, a lot of years now. And I still can't sleep at night with the lights off. So, and I kept it bottled up, a lot of it, for years. I mean, when stuff like this is going on in your life, and especially for someone like me who was, I mean, I knew nothing about the paranormal. And I had no idea who to contact. I just kept it bottled up. And it did stress me out eventually. And there were times when it was very stressful dealing with it. And it still affects me in a certain way. Now, I don't have nightmares about it. It's not like that. It's just that, for whatever reason, I can't sleep unless I have lights on. I can't sleep unless I have a blanket over me.
It's odd that you should say that, because I have a very similar situation. I've had experiences when I was a kid that are... One of these days I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about it, but not right now. But yeah, I have to have a light on, even if it's a dim light, just enough to see if I should open my eyes and hear something or what have you. And I also have to have a blanket on me, because I've had experiences where when I didn't have a blanket on me, something was touching me in the night.
Exactly. That's That's exactly what I'm talking about. You'd be laying there sound asleep, and it would feel like somebody was touching you.
Mm-hmm.
And that would happen. That would happen to me. It happened to my kid. It seemed like, I mean, I don't know that having the light on, I don't know that it actually made any real difference as far as the activity level goes, but for some reason
Just being able to see
it felt safer to have the light on.
Exactly. And as far as it's the same thing. I mean, I've even encountered paranormal things in the daytime, and you know, with the lights on at night, and you know, that kind of thing. But it seems to be a security factor, I guess. Is that
it's really odd. I mean, the activity level, especially living in the second house, well, even in the first house, the rental that I had those experiences in, I would have minor things happen that I couldn't explain, and like even those dishes being broke, that happened during the daytime. But the worst stuff happened at night, and it was always, it was really odd, because it seemed to happen not so much when my husband was home, but when I was by myself. And I used to really hack me off because, you know, why was it? It seemed like it was harassing me. It was.
You were a target. You were its target.
Yeah. And my husband, I mean, he saw things that were unexplainable, like the dishes and the doors being unlocked, and he would hear, you know, the noises that sounded like something was banging on the pipes. But and maybe the pipes weren't a paranormal thing. Maybe they're just old pipes, you know. I never, even living in this house and even knowing that there were things that were happening that I couldn't explain, I still looked at things very logically and tried to find logical reasons. It's like when the ball, you know, when I talked about the ball rolling back to my son. I'm a very logical person. I don't. Yeah. No, the vanishing part. Yeah. Well, when he first threw the ball, you know, and it rolled back, I was still looking, you know, maybe the floor is not even. This house, when the original part of the house was built in 1940s. And then it was built onto again in the 1970s. So, you know, it was possible to have some loose joints, that maybe the floor wasn't quite even, that might have caused that. You know, there were logical reasons for some of that stuff to happen. But then there were other reasons, other things that would happen that just absolutely I had no explanation for. None. And so I'm going to go back to the original where this house that I lived in for 20 years. I talked about the ball disappearing, and it was the rest of the evening after that. Like I said, from the the sound of those footsteps that were in our master bedroom when I had laid my baby down and had kind of halfway dozed off myself. From that point on, I never felt comfortable in that house. I felt like somebody was watching me consistently. It felt like I would have like from the living room, there was a hallway entry door, and it always felt like something or someone was standing there staring at me, and it would creep you out. It was a very scary, creepy feeling. It just made you feel really afraid and bad. And so I had a tough time dealing with that. In the meantime, my husband had started to, like I said, he was unpacking things, and he never really said anything about how he was feeling about stuff, or if he was feeling any of this stuff, and honestly, I didn't either. I mean, I didn't say anything to him either. After that first night, and after the ball situation, we didn't talk about it. We didn't. He went about doing what he needed to do as far as unpacking stuff and going to work, and I went about unpacking the stuff in the house and taking care of the kids and getting stuff ready for school. And we just moved on with our lives. We were just a normal, ordinary family. The first time that I had an inkling of what might actually be going on in this house happened about, a week later. I had a neighbor lady that lived across the street, and she had lived in that house pretty much all of her life. She was an older lady, very, very sweet lady, and she had brought over some cookies. She had made some cookies and was bringing them over to welcome us to the neighborhood. And I invited her in when she knocked on the door, and she sat down. I made some coffee, and we were sitting there drinking coffee and eating cookies, and she sat down in the living room in my rocking chair, and she says, "My gosh, I haven't been in this house in years." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "So do you know anything about the house?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I've lived in my house since the 1950s." And I was like, "Really? You've lived here a long time?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I even remember the original owner, the guy that built this house." And I said, "You do?" And I tell me more. This is my home. I want to know the history of my home. This is cool. I've got somebody here that knows some. And she said, "Yeah, I remember when they found him dead in this house." I was like, "What?" She said, "Yeah, he was kind of a loner, and he never married. He didn't have any children. He built the house and lived here. We used to see him just about every day. And one day we didn't see him. And we didn't see him for a couple of days. And eventually we started getting alarmed because, you know, his papers were building up, and so we finally we called the police, and they came in there, and yeah, he had died from a heart attack, but he had been here for several days. He'd been gone for several days. And I said, well, when was that? And she said, oh, about the 1960s, late 60s, early 70s. I was like, oh, wow. And it was weird because I said, well, do you know where they found him? I mean, like what room? Because I mean, you know, it kind of freaked me out, you know. And she said, well, no, I don't remember. I don't know what room it was. And she said, and the house has been rebuilt. I mean, it's been built onto and stuff like that. So yeah, she said, I don't remember. And so we finished the cookies and visited about other stuff. The other history of the house. It turns out that when in the 1970s, when they built on the garage and stuff like that to the house, they actually purchased a lot, or half of a lot, that another house had sat on, and they had torn that house down. It was old and decrepit and ready to go. They tore it down, and then they built the house, the garage and stuff, toward that lot. And then eventually the other neighbors, apparently they purchased the other half or something to that effect. They had purchased the other half, and so that became part of their yard. So that's why we had a lot and a half. She didn't tell me much history about the other house, so I don't know that anything other than the house had been abandoned and decrepit, and it was, you know, it was becoming a hazard. So they bought the lots and tore the house down. And but it did creep me out. I mean, it creeped me out really, really badly. I mean, I suppose that, you know, there's a lot of houses people have lived in where people have died in. But because of some of the stuff that I had experienced in the house, I started kind of wondering if my house might be haunted. Or, you know, if that might be the reason why I was having some issues. But I didn't say anything to anyone. I just kept it to myself. About along toward November, we had decided to have a big Thanksgiving dinner. And my husband had found a whole bunch of old cedar boards. He was very crafty when it came to wood. And he took these cedars and he worked them, you know, I don't know what all he did. I mean, he took them into the garage and he basically built us a dining room table, a cedar dining room table. And it was gorgeous. And he bought some chairs to match the stain color so that it was one of those country tables. It was a cedar country table. And he'd just gotten that done. And I had salvaged from an old barn that someone was tearing down. They were found in the barn, but there was these, somebody had handcrafted these great big cast iron candle holders. So they were big and they were heavy, and I had sanded them down and painted them, and I wanted to put them up in the dining room. And in order to do that, we had to, there was a big dining room door, and I wanted to put one on either side of that dining room door. And they fit perfectly there, one on each side. But we had to have these great big 16-penny nails to be able to hold them in there. And because of the loophole, the cast iron loophole where the nail was to go, we also needed one that had a wide head so that they would be held in place. And my husband, we put them on there, and I painted the nail hole black so that it matched this cast iron look, so they wouldn't be noticeable. We mailed them on there, and they stayed up there. I put these nice candles that I bought and placed those on there, and it stayed up there for several days. Well, I needed to get some different cutlery, and I wanted a decent cutting board. And we went to the grocery store. It was like a store that specialized in nice cutlery and nice cutting boards and things like that, and I wanted to get some really nice salt shakers to go onto that table and different things like that. So we went and we got this stuff. Now, these cast iron things had stayed up there for days. At this point, it had been several days. The candles, everything stayed fine. I mean, when we got back, it was actually the first time that all of us had left where the house was alone. There was nobody in it. I went into the into the dining room, and laying on the floor was the candles, both candles from both candle holders, and one of the cast iron candle holders was laying on the floor. The other one looked like somebody had tilted it, but the 16-penny nail was still in the wall, which meant that, and that was the only thing that was touched in that whole room, and actually in the whole house.
Huh. Looked like somebody had kicked it or thrown it, or.
Well, they were laying a foot or two away from the wall.
But the nails were still on the wall.
The other cast iron candle holder was still hooked to the wall, but it was twisted sideways a little bit, like twisted, like somebody had turned it. And I mean, these were nailed tight to the wall so they would not fall off. And we had made sure we'd gone to the hardware store and gotten, they were 16 penny nails, but they were large-headed, large-rounded head nails, so that they would absolutely not come off the wall. When you're talking cast iron, you're talking really heavy. And my biggest concern about putting those up was I was worried if they fell, I was worried that they might fall on one of the kids or something like that. Because they were pretty good size.
Yeah.
And cast iron, they were heavy. But the hole, like I said, the hole that was made for these, for where your nail goes, because they were made to be hung up. I mean, whoever made these had made them to be hung up. It's the way that nail covered that. I never could figure out how they got that cast iron candle holder off of that wall without removing the nail. I never figured it out, because that hole, I mean, sometimes, you can
16
maneuver
penny nail
something.
is about the size width of a little bit less than a cigarette, or pretty close in there. It's it's big, and they were all the way into the wall. If they were into a stud, then there's no real way that you can pull that out without a hammer or like a trying to think here, like a claw hammer.
Yeah.
And then
well,
if you did,
if they had been done, if they'd have done anything like that, there would have been some kind of mark on the wall from the claw hammer trying to pull that thing out. There would have been evidence that nail had been messed with.
You had 4 kids, right? And one of them was 2 years old still. And
he wasn't actually 2. He was about 18 months old. He was just old enough to walk. And
so unlikely that any of your kids would have been even tall enough to reach them or would pull on them or anything like that.
Well, and all the others were in school.
Oh.
This was November. This was about a week or 2 before Thanksgiving. And we were decorating the dining room up, getting ready to have a nice Thanksgiving dinner with the family. And I had wanted to put those things up for years, but living in rentals, didn't want to put a hole that big in the wall. Because we're talking, needing a big, heavy nail to put these in. And you don't want to have to pay for that in a rental. Most rentals would not let you put something like that big a hole in their walls. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose some people do, but we just didn't. I just kept them in storage, and I figured that, eventually I would be able to use them at some point in time. We'd always made plans to buy our own home. But it was really, really strange that when I moved the one that was still on the wall, it did move fairly easily as far as being able to move it from side to side. So I had my husband put another 16 penny down at the bottom so that it didn't move. It stayed right there. And then I had him recheck the other one to see if you could slide the nail hole over that penny. Yeah, over the nail head.
Yeah.
And he had tried and I watched him. He couldn't do it. There wasn't any way. And we could not figure out how that happened. it was another one of those, you know, you're looking at this thinking, okay, well, maybe the hole's bigger, the nail hole's bigger, and maybe it could have easily slid off.
And they're cast iron, so you wouldn't think they would bend or anything to, you know, form around the nail head or anything like that to be able to bend the candle holder or anything like that?
No, no. When you're talking cast iron, that's solid. I mean, there's no bending it. Whoever made these, they
literally cast them.
Yeah, they were. We got some other things that they had made using like old tractors and old, like I had one thing that was, it was actually for potted plants, but it was made from like old horseshoes and old, looked like an old yoke thing from like an oxen yoke plow.
Like antique stuff.
Yeah, they were old. I mean, they were very old. But again, I have this eye for really unique stuff. And when this friend of ours was tearing down his garage and he found this stuff, he called us and he was like, "Hey, I got this stuff. It's pretty cool, but I don't really want it. I don't really have a place for it. Do you guys want it?" And I was like, "Well, I'm gonna go check it out." And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that is some cool stuff." So, that was something that we just couldn't explain. I mean, he had to pull that nail out, and yes, he did have to use a claw hammer, and we did have to putty the area because it did dent the wall. And then he had to put that back on there and re-nail it in there. And I went ahead and kept that up till after Thanksgiving, and then I had him go ahead and just pull them both down because I was finding issues with candles. I bought some more candles. The first candles, they had hit the floor so hard that they had dented them.
Wow.
And so, of course, they were ruined. So had him get some different candles, put those up, and I kept finding, you know, my candles on the floor. And so, you know, eventually I was like, you know, I just take them down. So he took them down, we re-puttied the wall, did a little paint, and I never put them back up again. But, yeah, that was in the first few months. One of the other things that was happening was my husband and I were fighting a lot, arguing a lot. He was becoming more and more short-tempered. And it was starting to get to the point that by Christmas, he was losing his temper at the drop of a dime. And I mean, it could be over just any little thing. Now, he wasn't hitting or hurting anybody or anything, but he would just rage about something, anything. Didn't matter what it was. And it was starting to cause some issues. I mean, it was starting to cause some real issues. Christmas came and went. Thanksgiving came and went. We didn't really have any major issues. We didn't have really anything going on. January, February, March. By February, my husband had decided that he no longer wanted to be married. We had been arguing a lot. There was a lot of friction between us, but there was no activity as far as supernatural or any of that other kind of stuff that it's just that there was it was almost like a personality change in my husband that I was not willing to tolerate. I'm going to skip on to the very, very first time when I absolutely had no doubt there was something paranormal. By March, my husband and I, we had separated, and I was on the phone. I'd gotten a call from a friend of mine. I was on the phone talking to her, and I was in the living room, and all of a sudden, I heard every cabinet in my kitchen sound like it slammed open. Remember, I have this weird thing about open cabinet doors, so all my cabinet doors were shut. And I looked over, and every cabinet in my kitchen was wide open. And right before my eyes, every cabinet door shut all at once. Wow. Now there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cabinet doors. And they were double cabinet doors, which meant there was 10 doors total. They all opened and they all shut at once right before my eyes while I was talking to a friend of mine. And I was in mid-sentence, and I just froze. I grabbed my baby, which headed out the door, headed to the car. I don't even remember hanging up, but apparently I did. And I went over to a friend of mine's house, and I stayed there. And I actually didn't come home till the kids, it was time for the kids to come home from school. And that was actually the first time that I realized that there was really something seriously wrong with this house. I mean, all of the other stuff, there were a few things that I just really couldn't explain. It was still possible that the cast iron nail, that it was just enough space for it to maybe have slipped through. I couldn't explain why the candles were on the floor, but, why they kept falling on the floor. But, there could have been some vibration, maybe from something that might have, you just don't know. I mean, I don't have an actual reason, but there are some very logical reasons. But the cabinet doors opening and closing by themselves all at once, and I mean, they slammed open and then they slammed shut.
It's crazy. Wow.
I didn't have an explanation for that.
I think I probably would be... Well, after I cleaned out my drawers, I don't even know what I would do in a situation like that. That's horrifying.
I went to my friend's house. She asked me what was wrong. I guess I was very pale. I told her that I just really wasn't feeling good, that I was really tired. But I would just come over and visit because I just didn't feel like staying home. I just didn't really want to talk to anyone about it. I didn't know how to talk to people about this. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, I really did not know what else to do. I didn't have internet set up at that time, so I didn't have, like, you know, how to find out any information about this.
Facebook wasn't a thing 20 years ago.
And stuff. Yeah, well, this would have been about 1996. 97. Well, we bought the house would have been August of 96. This would have been March of 97. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, I just internalized it. I kept my mouth shut and pretended like everything was okay. And I mean, I really didn't know what to think. I really didn't. I did not. I was in the middle of a separation. I had 4 kids. I was under a lot of stress, and I kept thinking, you know, I've been under a lot of stress. I've never had anything like that happen. That's not a hallucination. I've never had any of those kind of things, hallucinations, and it was reminiscent of the first house.
So
with the cabinets and the doors and stuff like that.
You and your husband separated because you think that do you think that the house may have had something to do with it, had altered his personality in some way to the point that he just left? Or, I mean,
I really, really don't know. My husband and I,
I've heard of
I don't know.
spirits being able to manipulate people like that, and from it in the beginning, when you were talking about when you first moved in, you guys were sitting on the couch and you were talking about once you felt that thing staring at you, that his personality changed very quickly into something that he wasn't used to normally being.
No. Yeah, he wasn't. He was not. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there were. I mean, you know, we had our arguments off and on. I mean, for 13 years of marriage at that point in time, you know, people argue. People have. But I'd never seen him like that. I mean that I didn't recognize who that was. And that would happen. He would fly off the handle, and it would be like, you know, I can remember I started getting irritated with it, and I said, you know, what is your problem? What is going on with you?
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, you're freaking me out. You're freaking the kids out. What is your problem, man? What is going on with you? I mean, are you stressed out about the house? I mean, is there something going on at work? What is going on with you?
I've heard of people. I've heard of them affecting people like that. That's why I ask. It's very strange, but I've heard multiple cases where somebody became either partially or fully possessed by something, either, well, in most of these cases it's something demonic, but it's not like The Exorcist where it's all at once, you know. I have heard of cases like that, but that's mostly Hollywood. Generally what I've seen is specific personality changes in people for little or no reason, and those changes manifest through a lot of anger, hatred, sometimes depression, anxiety, things like that, and basically they become a different person, and it's a character of whatever it is that's taking them over. And so I kind of wonder, especially since you said that, you know, from your first story, your first part of the story, when you're sitting on the couch in the garage and that thing, his personality changed like that. If somebody's susceptible,
I feel, you know, all these years later, I remember just thinking, oh my God, what? I mean, don't get, you know, he did have a short temper. Okay, he had a short fuse.
Yeah.
But he was not like that.
Yeah.
He was not like that. I mean, that was not. I like I said, I've never had to back away from him.
Yeah.
But there were quite a few times that I had to back away from him after moving into that house. I mean, there were times when I was like, you know.
Well,
I did think that it.
I mean, I'm just gonna come straight out with it. Do you think that he was possessed by something, or do you think there's a possibility?
I don't know. I don't really believe in possession. I don't. All of the stuff that I've dealt with and stuff, I don't really know a whole lot about it. Okay, first of all.
Yeah.
But I have trouble believing. I don't know. I have trouble believing in that.
That's kind of one of those things where.
I sound like a hypocrite because of what I went through.
Yeah.
But I've never actually seen anything like that, and I don't really trust everything that's on the internet, you know, and I don't believe in
a lot of Hollywood stuff, you know. I mean,
yeah,
I've heard of it, but it has mostly been Hollywood that, you know.
I mean, you know, I've read Christian books regarding that kind of thing. There's, you know, different histories that are supposed to have been true about different things, different people, and I guess I'm no different than anybody else. And when it comes to, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't experienced it, you really don't know what to believe in those things.
What's real and what's not? Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
I understand. I was just wondering what your take was on that, because I'm kind of unsure on that myself. I haven't seen it either, like firsthand, but it's probably not something that I would personally want to see. I'll be honest with you.
No, I really don't. I know, and it's not that I don't believe in demons, and it's not that I don't believe in angels. I do. I believe in all of that stuff. I am, like I said, I'm very spiritual. I do believe in God. If there's a God, there's a devil. If there's angels, there's demons. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I'm at with things as far as my beliefs go. I don't know where spirits come from. I don't know what they are, and apparently neither does anybody else, really, for sure. I don't know why some houses never have any issues and some people never experience any of those kinds of stuff and other people do. I have no explanation as to why these things were happening in my house. In reality, that is the absolute truth. I really don't know why they happened in that other house, but yet in the 5 or 6 other houses that we lived in after that period of time, nothing ever happened. Nothing like that ever happened.
I can honestly tell you, I've been a paranormal researcher for around 12 years, and actively seeking out these things to find out what they are and find out as much information as I can about them, and I can honestly tell you that I don't either. I don't have any answers for you either. And it's kind of a sad thing, but at least it was in my spare time, you know, that I'm doing this and not like taking it up as some kind of a job or something. But I mean, not accomplishing anything in that field, at least, you know, you kind of learn a little bit, and, you know, I guess living in a haunted house you do too.
Well, and that's the whole thing, is that, you know, as the months went on, as living in the house, we, at first, I mean, we would have stuff like what I've explained happen at times. We would have doors open and shut, you know, and I always thought, well, maybe there's a wind up somewhere. I had a huge philodendron that I had been growing for about 3 or 4 years. And I had it in a macrame hanger, one of the great big giant macrame hangers. And I had it hanging in front of my window, and my living room window. Now that window was a great big picture window. It did not open or close, and it was still tight. There was no draft. But there was also a vent, an air conditioning and heater vent not far from it, and I would see it move back and forth. Now, it was very heavy. Very heavy. I had it hanging from the ceiling, from one of the ceiling hooks, and I would see it sway back and forth at times. And, you know, at first it kind of freaked me out because, you know, especially after the kitchen cupboard incident. But I went over there, you know, and I explored it, and I thought, okay, well, there's a vent there. The door's about 4 or 5 feet. There might be a draft coming in there or something. Maybe that's making it move. And I blew it off as that. Because I was never, I mean, this was my home. Okay? And again, while there had been things that had happened in this place, I was a homeowner now.
Yeah.
And this is my home. And it had never hurt me. It had never hurt my kids. Nothing, you know, nothing physically had happened to us on those levels that we, you know. And I was, by that time, like by March, you know, the divorce was in full scale, and I got the house in the divorce settlement eventually, and, you know, this was my home. Now, some people are going to ask me, why didn't I just move, you know, because a lot of people would. As soon as their cabinet doors are opening like that, you know, and kind of stuff, they would have moved. Well, the issue that I had actually thought about putting the house up for market. As soon as I got the divorce, I was going to go ahead and probably just put the house on market and sell it. But then I started looking around at the possibility of having to rent another house. And because during the divorce, you know, I don't know about now, but back then, you know, your credit was pretty well shot. So it wasn't like you're going to go out there and be able to buy another house without a big ballooning payment and on and on and on. But when I was looking at other rentals, you know, for the size that I needed in that area, it was going to cost me a lot more than I was going to be able to afford on a monthly basis and still be able to take care of all 4 of my kids. I mean, you know, we were talking $600 to $700 or $800 back then. Now it's more like about $1,000 in that town, close to, and that was more than I could afford. So I chose to stay. And whenever I would get those, you know, feelings of fear or what have you, whenever I would hear throughout the night for years, I would hear what literally it sounded like it would be like this really loud bang up in the attic, and it would shake the whole house. And it would sound like it was up in our attic. It sounded like maybe some kind of, you know, like a giant tree branch or something had fallen on the house. And it would happen in the middle of the night. And, you know, and I would hear things like it would sound like there was like animals or something walking in on the beams of the attic. And there was no way that could happen because the attic door was a solid door that was padlocked shut. So there was no way for birds and squirrels and that kind of stuff. They would have had to gotten into the garage, which I always kept shut and locked, and then gotten through a wooden door that was padlocked to get up there in the attic. And even then, although I wasn't sure what the loud bang, the loud booming noises were, the things walking that sound like birds and stuff walking, or squirrels or something walking up there in the attic, I thought, well, you know, maybe there's squirrels or something that's walking on the roof, and maybe I'm hearing that. The problem is I would hear them at night, and most squirrels, from what I've seen, they're sleeping at night. They're not out running around on people's roofs. They're birds too. I mean, most of the birds around here, around that area, they're sleeping at night. They're not out wandering around and prancing around on people's roofs. Plus, when you looked outside, nobody else had birds or squirrels prancing around on the roofs at night.
We're going to have to go ahead and cut it there, and we can make another episode if you want to. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode of this Lynn's story here on YouTube on 85 Studios. If you want to have your story featured on 85 Studios, please contact us at facebook.com/85studios1 and on Twitter at 85 Studios YouTube. And thank you for watching. Please hit subscribe and follow the channel to get updates on videos, and please like the video if you like the video, and leave us a comment down below and tell us what you think. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next episode.